Joining us now, another master negotiator of all time, Curtis Ellis. He was on the transition team. He was in the Trump campaign. He used to be the chairman, the executive director of the job of America Jobs Alliance. Now I am. He's chairman emeritus. Big title. He was also with the Department of Labor. He's been all over the world 3 times over, plus India recently. And he's with us now to break down the Mueller hoax investigation. Curtis.
Hey,
welcome.
hey. It's opening day.
999.
999. 10. La, la, la. Who's that? La, la, la. What is that? Froggy the Gremlin? Who is that?
Kiera, play 999 again. 999. That was Herman Cain.
Herman Cain? Sounds like Froggy the Gremlin. I want all your listeners to Google Froggy the Gremlin. It was my favorite TV character when I was a kid on Andy's Gang. I'm really dating myself now. One of my earliest memories. Andy's Gang. Andy Devine had this kid show.
I bet our listeners didn't know that Curtis Ellis and I are about the same age, right? The only difference is Curtis is eligible for Medicare and I'm not. That's the only difference.
Uh-oh. Now it's out. Yep.
It's out. Yep. You're 62. I'm 61. But I'm jealous because you've got Medicare and I still have to buy my insurance.
Yeah, really.
All right, Curtis. Let's get on to the Mueller investigation.
Yes.
I will.
So, hey, I was just watching Rand Paul on Fox and Friends. He tweeted last night, and today he's talking about it. He has a source that tells him, Brennan, what is it, James Brennan? I can't keep these liars straight. The former CIA director under Obama. It was Brennan's idea to put the Steele dossier into the briefing when they briefed President Trump. Gave him his intelligence briefing. They slipped in this phony dossier, which then provided the hook for fake news CNN and others to report it, because nobody reported it. The thing was so stupid, so ridiculous, so science fiction-like, that it had been kicking around the media for months, and the media wouldn't even report it. Even the fake news media said, this is too fake for us. We're not going to even report it. So our spy masters, James Brennan, came up with the idea, well, I got it. We'll brief the president on it, and then then the news media has a real story. They could say the president was briefed on this dossier.
Right.
So, and that started the whole ball rolling. And we ended up with where we are now. And where we are now is they finally, after 2 years and all that time and money and effort and search warrants and wiretaps and everything else, bankrupting people and making lawyers rich, they decided there's no evidence of collusion. So what I say is that we've got to get to the bottom of how this whole thing started, because it's very fishy, and it looks like the intelligence agencies were trying to overturn the election. They were targeting Donald Trump. They didn't like him. He wasn't part of the swamp. And so the swamp creatures are trying to spit him out. They came up with they framed him. But the glove didn't fit, so they had to acquit. So that's the way it looks to me, but we can't go on what it looks like to me. We need to investigate this and get to the bottom of it. This is the nightmare scenario, that you have a permanent government choosing who gets to serve in the government. No, that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the American voters choose who's president. American people choose who's Congress. But instead, it looks like we've got some spies and military national security people and all these other weirdo swamp creatures deciding who gets to be president. And if you don't fit their profile, sorry, they'll find a way to frame you up and take you down.
Well, you know, Curtis, last night I'm gonna get this clip here in a minute from Kiera. Last night on Hannity, show, the president said exactly that, which I thought was pretty stunning. So he's not ready to move on from this. Of course, either are the Democrats, because Adam Schiff is still saying there's collusion, even though the Mueller report was quoted as saying there is no collusion. He's still saying he believes there is. So they're going to continue to go down this path. But the president said, look, there was an attempt here to basically get me out of office by a handful of people in the deep state, if you will, or in the FBI, DOJ. But he said there was an active effort to overturn the election by a handful of people. And for the president of the United States, and I know he tweets things out and it aggravates people, but for the president of the United States to make the serious charge that, look, there was an effort to remove me as president based on a couple of people or a number of people. I mean, that's a pretty, Curtis, think about what the president said last night. That is a serious allegation to make. Don't you agree?
Yes, that's a very serious allegation. It's a very serious allegation, and it has to be taken seriously. We have to look into it. Because there's a lot of evidence that points to that. Remember back in, I don't know when it was, at the beginning of his presidency, he said they wiretapped his campaign, and everybody said, oh, that's ridiculous.
Right,
and then
that's right, I remember that.
They did, and you never heard the media recant and say, oh, well, gee. This is a very serious allegation. We've got and a lot of serious evidence to back it up, that it demands that it be investigated and we get to the bottom of it. This is, as I said, the nightmare scenario. For years, look, here's another one, folks. Google this, 7 Days in May. It was a movie with Burt Lancaster, made in like 1960. Mm-hmm. And it was this paranoid political thriller about the military staging a coup and overthrowing the president because they didn't like him. And it was 7 days in May, and the coup plotters there. 7 days in May, we're going to overthrow the president. This is what we've always been afraid of. In the 1970s, Senator Frank Church from Idaho, a liberal Democrat, set up the Church Committee, and they looked into and investigated abuses by the FBI and the CIA and the NSA, the National Security Agency, that were spying on Americans. And they're not supposed to spy on Americans. And everybody was always worried and concerned, and more than worried, they were really crazy upset. J. Edgar Hoover was wiretapping Martin Luther King. He was wiretapping the Kennedys, and he was blackmailing politicians. Like, nobody dared to cut J. Edgar Hoover's budget. Congress or the president would not dare suggest curtailing that guy's power or money because he had dirt on them, and he
had files on them.
He's like, that's not the way the government's supposed to run.
You were so right. First of all, your movie, 7 Days in May, Burt Lancaster, a great movie. Kind of was a sleeper, never kind of got the acclaim it did, but if anybody is an old movie buff, that is a great film. And secondly, the Church Commission, which the Republicans harpooned for years, because back then the Republicans were all for, they hate big government, except in those days when it came to CIA, NSA, FBI, then they were all for it. But remember, the Church Commission was exposing spying on regular Americans, right, for no reason.
Yeah. We discovered the NSA, the National Security Agency, had files on 70,000 Americans.
That's right. And they had no authorization to do that. And the Church Commission was so dynamic, was so bold, they uncovered this. And Church became a national figure, ran for president in 1976, got beat by Jimmy Carter, but he ran on that issue. And the other thing is, Congress reacted to that, and they cut back funding on the CIA by massive amounts, just as retaliatory to that. But that was also
they also set up the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Oversight Committee to keep an eye on these agencies. And now you have Adam Schiff has turned the House Intelligence Committee into a joke. These committees were set up to keep an eye on the secret intelligence agencies and look for abuses and investigate any potential abuses. And now you've got this clown, Adam Smith, in charge of the House Intelligence Committee, saying daring to ask questions about the Intelligence Committee is obstruction of justice and unpatriotic. Dude, did you read the job description?
Oh, this guy should resign, because he still today is out there on CNN saying there was Russian collusion, and he wants to continue with the investigation.
Well, he's from California, and they've legalized pot in California, so that might explain everything.
He's got something going on. But, you know, and I'm going to play this clip here in a minute, but the president basically saying this was a attempted overthrow, a coup, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, the only time we've actually ever had this in history was was during the Civil War. There was a group of generals that were plotting to overthrow Lincoln. I forget the exact year it was or the time frame, but I remember they met and they plotted for that. That was actually the only time in history that we actually had that, and we were very close to that happening. And anyway, that's simply in the history books. All right, I'm going to get to this clip here, Kara. Let's run this and get Curtis to comment on it. This is Trump with Hannity last night talking about an attempted coup.
Well, we're very happy about it. It's gone on for a long time, almost since the beginning of my term. And, you know, if you look at it, we've done so much despite that. But it was a cloud. It was a cloud that most people didn't believe, fortunately. They spent more than $30 million, hundreds of interviews of people, in some cases very innocent people that were put through the ringer, millions of document pages, millions and millions of document pages. And after that, there was no collusion. There was no obstruction. It was such a ridiculous thing that happened. On the other hand, you know, you look at how did this start? How did it start? You had dirty cops. You had people that are bad. FBI folks, I know so many, they're incredible people, but at the top, they were not clean, to put it mildly. And what they did to our country was a terrible, terrible thing.
So, Curtis, I'm for a special counsel. I know we don't like special counsels, but you're never going to get to the bottom of this, leaving it up to some inspector general that moves at a snail's pace. I mean, we already spent $25 million. I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to see, did Stephanie Powers or did NSA Director Rice unmask these names? I want to get to, was Obama aware of this? I want to get to the tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton. I want to get to what evidence was in the FISA warrant that went to the FISA judge. I want to know what evidence Rod Rosenstein had when he investigated, when he went with a special counsel. What evidence did he have on Russian collusion? Don't you think these are questions we deserve to have the answers to?
These are questions we absolutely must have the answer to. And your point about a special counsel is really interesting. We don't like special counsels, but the reason you appoint a special counsel is because the agency or the president or the political appointees are not capable of, are implicated in the crime, right? Are implicated in the crime. Here we have a situation where the career employees and some past politicals are implicated in the crime. Can the Justice Department career employees investigate this matter when it's the career employees within the Justice Department that may well be guilty of the crimes they're investigating? See, that's the problem. That's a real problem. That's how vast and massive this conspiracy, if you will, this problem is, where you've got the permanent government itself protecting itself and trying to reject, like a transplanted organ, trying to reject the elected officials because it doesn't like the elected officials. Yeah, we need to know, did Susan Rice and Samantha Powers unmask? And your point about the President Obama issue is interesting. Remember what Watergate was. The whole Watergate thing started because President Nixon's people tried to plant a wiretap on the Democratic opponent. Well, here what we're looking at is, in fact, the FBI did wiretap the President Trump's campaign, the Donald J. Trump campaign. Now, do you think that before they took this step, well, we have to plant a wiretap and plant surveillance on some of the campaign people, they might inform the President of the United States saying, look, we've got to tell you about this because if it came out in the media, you might be, there could be some hell to pay. So we want you to know that we're doing this. Or maybe they didn't inform him for that very reason. We want you to have plausible deniability. It's another question that needs to be answered. Susan Rice wrote herself a memo. This came out on January 17th. She wrote a memo to herself saying on January 5th, she and James Comey and President Obama had a meeting in the Oval Office to discuss the Russia investigation. She didn't say what he was told or if that was the first time he was told about this Russia investigation or the full dimensions of what he was briefed on concerning this Russia investigation. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and we really need to get to the bottom of this, to have faith in the government, that the government is doing what it's supposed to do and not coloring outside the lines.
Curtis Ellis, you are so right, and I am out of time. John Fredericks Radio Network Ambassador Ann Patterson, Egypt, coming up. John Fredericks Radio Network. Keep